information line on 0181 746 1111. Coming into focus, this is BBC Learning Zone. Welcome now to an hour of film and media programmes on BBC Learning Zone. Teachers and tutors might find these programmes useful in the classroom, otherwise it's a chance to go behind the scenes and find out how the movie business really works. At 4:30, travel into the imagination of the artist Gerald Scarfe on his Herculean adventure in Disneyland. But now, let's unravel the true story of the journey of a movie from Hollywood to the local multiplex in The Distributor's Tale.
Promise me you'll come back for me.
I promise I'll come back for you.
The film industry, when we talk about it, we normally talk about the film production industry. We're completely wrong to do that. We have to talk about it as a distribution industry. That's what it is. The successful players are distributors, because that's where they make their money.
Distributors may make money from films, but the pathway from production to distribution to profit is not an easy one.
I remember William Goldman saying that nobody knows anything in this business. I think that is probably very true. One of the problems with this is that you're dealing with people's emotions. You're dealing with what people feel when they see a film. And you can't dictate that to them. You can't instruct them to like a film. You can't con them into liking a film. They will be the ultimate determinant.
It is a business at the end of the day, and we are paid to make judgments at the end of the day, and sometimes we're right and sometimes we're wrong.
People's careers actually turn on their ability to judge the risk. And you may say, well, if he lost $3 million, he must be out of a job. Well, yes, but there again, we've made other decisions that have made tens of millions of dollars profits. And it's all about gambling.
The marketing and distributing films is an amazing thing, because when you realize that you have a product that has cost millions and millions of pounds or dollars to make, that for the most part no one knows anything about 6 weeks before it's released into the theaters, and in that short period of time you have to start from zero awareness, make half of the country aware that there's this product, want to go to the theater and see it, and then you have just a few weeks to get the people there to see it, and it's gone.
3 weeks to create an awareness of a product that we don't necessarily need or want.
I think it's important to realize that when you're marketing a film, essentially, actually, it's just like marketing any other product in terms of the tools that you have at your disposal.
The distributor must persuade us to go and see a film, a story about which we may know either a lot or nothing at all, that we may or may not want to see, to create a cinematic event. The distributor must invest money to make money, must exploit a film to profit from it.
When we're launching a film, we're essentially selling dreams.
Well, what you're selling when you begin to market a movie is, firstly, the need for entertainment. Everybody needs entertainment. Everybody needs stories.
Dreams, stories and entertainment transformed into a concrete product to be sold to an audience.
When we've seen the film in a rough format, when it's almost complete, and when we've got the 20 different draft campaigns, we will then come to a point where we decide what the unique selling point is. And the unique selling point is the hook that we're going to use to try and lure the public in?
Firstly, she finds the special factor in the story. That's the most important factor. Then after that, you start marketing the other aspects of the movie, the special effects, the locations, the stars. Those are very important.
Some films just have their own momentum. People want to see them from day one. Films like Jurassic Park was the right film at the right time, made by the world's most famous director, and from before it started filming, everybody wanted to see that film. With other films, it takes time to build up want to see.
There's an important distinction to make in terms of films. There is what is called the marketability of the film and the playability of the film. And these are quite different kinds of things. That the marketability of a film means how well you can persuade the public to want to see the film. And this takes place almost exclusively, although not totally exclusively, before a film is released. And it involves the publicity that you get for films, the editorial coverage that you get for films, premieres, all kinds of editorial notice, and more importantly, it involves advertising. And whether it's through posters, through trailers in a cinema, or through TV advertising. It's critically important, but that determines whether the marketability of the film. If you've done that right, even if a film is not necessarily good, you may be able to get it to open well on the opening weekend because you've interested people in seeing it. The playability of the film is a very different thing. That's how, when an audience actually sees the film, it responds to it. And the fact that a film is marketable doesn't mean that it's playable.
A marketable film sold to us by a distributor is not always playable, not always popular with an audience. The potential value of the film is where the distributor begins.
Like any other product, the first thing you've got to ask yourself is, how much can we make from this? And that really has to be your starting point. So you look at the film, you look at the product that you've got there, and you have to put a potential value on that. And it's a lot of guesswork in a lot of cases.
Someone sits down and says, I've seen the movie, I think it's going to take X in my country. And then he says, I can afford to spend 25, 35% of that estimate on advertising. But the estimate is a guess. It's based on the same gut instinct. It can be wrong, because no one ever knows in the movie business. You don't know.
Well, the budget is very much decided on the basis of how much money we can make with the film. And so whenever we are sitting down looking at the film for the first time, we're thinking, how far is this going to go? How many people are going to go and see this film? And then the second part of the thought process is, well, how many people more than that do we think we can persuade if we spend a bit more money behind it?
It gives us a guide as to how much we can afford to spend. We try not to let those two things push us down. I mean, we can't afford to estimate what we think the film will do in rental and then only spend half of it or 75% of it, because that way we could end up falling far short.
There are probably four main types of budget. You've got your big blockbuster budget. For example, Men in Black we have coming out later this summer. It's going to be a fantastic blockbuster for us. And so we'd spend enormous amounts of money on that. And then you have your major titles on which you would spend a great deal of money, but not to the blockbuster level. Then you have what you would say a more sort of mainstream amount of money, which is smaller again. And then perhaps for a smaller film that's for a very particular small audience, obviously we wouldn't spend as much as any of the previous three. So it's to do with how much money we think we have to spend in order to achieve the sort of income that we want to make on that film.
It can become a self-fulfilling prophecy in that if you say Leaving Las Vegas can only ever do $80 million and therefore you limit its marketing budget, maybe if you'd spent more, it would have made more. And it's all about risk analysis. It's all about whether we are prepared to invest more money than our accountants would like us to. I think it's probably the best way of saying it. And that basically comes down to people like myself deciding whether we're going to take a risk.
The risk is proportionate to what money a film could take at the box office. Decisions about risk can be spread over a number of areas. A budget must be set.
Advertising is fairly straightforward in terms of that's paid for advertising space, be it on television newspapers, posters, radios, whatever you can think of. Publicity essentially is free, and that is us getting extra media space on television or press or radio by using star interviews, star profiles and what have you. Promotions used to be, I suppose, or considered to be the same thing as publicity, but in this territory, as in many other territories, they've changed quite significantly. They can be free to the distributor, but on some occasions it's a case of us giving something to a third party in return for a major promotion.
So what we spend on television, newspapers, magazines, radio, that's the major part of the budget. Then we have all the things that lead up to that, so we call that production. So we have, you know, the money that makes the TV spots, that makes the radio spots, that puts together the newspaper advertising.
The budget itself has to take into account the cost of prints and the cost of marketing materials like posters and trailers, and the cost of all forms of advertising, whether it's TV or radio or press or outdoor posters, and the cost of all the materials that go with that, and the cost of any PR activity, be it a premiere or be it bringing, you know, big stars to this country and paying for their first-class flights and their hairdressers and their makeup artists and their, you know, pocket money that they apparently need for every day they work, etc., etc. So it's a big, you know, the budget has to take in a very large amount of detail and has to make sure that it keeps focus on the things that are actually going to sell the film.
Whether it's a small movie or a large movie, you'll be asking yourself questions like, who's the target audience? When are we going to launch it? How are we going to launch it? What do you think we can make? How much do you think we have to spend? It's actually the same process. Ultimately, the amount you will spend on a smaller movie will generally be a lot less than a big movie because there's less potential out there. And then sometimes you'll actually make more money on the smaller movies because you haven't actually spent that much money, but the thing has got great word of mouth and it will run and run and run and run. And think about films like Il Postino and Shine and stuff, which have done tremendous business with relatively small investments.
As more and more cinemas, more and more multiplexes have been built in the UK, the number of prints required, number of actual physical 35mm prints of a film that are required for a release have gone up and up and up. I mean, now on a big animated release like Hercules, we'll probably have somewhere in the region of 500 to 550 print, each costing, you know, a minimum of £800 each. So, you know, the actual physical cost of supplying cinemas in this country with prints is a substantial cost.
At the end of the day, it is a business, and you have to make business decisions. And you have to look at the potential of that product and then spend accordingly in most of the cases.
The distributor spends a percentage of what they think they can earn. However, the cinema goer buying the ticket at the box office ultimately determines whether a film is financially successful.
It's really a matter of putting yourself in the place of the consumer that you're trying to influence and say, now what, if I were that person, where would I see the film? What information? Where do I get my information? What influences me? And try and position your film in that.
Every movie has a different audience segment that it appeals to.
First of all, we have a look at the movie itself. We make up our mind who we feel is the prime target audience for the film. That's always our starting point, because from that we will develop posters and trailers and all the various marketing materials that go towards promoting a film. And further on down the line, the publicity effort, where we're going to get editorial, etc. However, we never stop at just our target audience. We always need to make sure that we are going to satisfy that core audience first and foremost. We never want to lose sight of that audience. You can get yourself into a lot of trouble if you take for granted that a certain group of people are going to be so attracted to a film that whatever you do, if you create a poster or you create a trailer that goes right against what that audience is expecting, that they'll still come.
Name, rank, serial number.
Sorry, I can't help you.
The box office success of The English Patient did not just happen of its own accord. Daniel Batzek explains the careful planning behind the campaign.
Well, with The English Patient, our campaign was a very long and detailed one in order to gradually build a large crossover and, in fact, mainstream audience for the film. I mean, with that film, I would say it started as a crossover film and became a mainstream film. And the process that we went through on that was really to ensure that that the publicity effort started very early so that we could take advantage of the success of the film in America. In this particular case, we were very grateful that the film opened in America first. We didn't want to open concurrent with America or just after. We wanted to play into the awards period, the Oscar nomination period, which started on February the 24th. But the American release started in November. So we wanted to make sure that our publicity effort, particularly highlighting the British content of the film, started with the American release. As the film started to take over at the box office there, that fed into the UK. And gradually, month by month, as time went by between that release and our release, the size of the film in terms of its profile in the media became larger and larger. Started off as a film that The Guardian and The Independent talked about, ended as a film that The Sun and the Daily Mirror talked about. And that obviously is how the film crossed over to a mainstream audience. We tried to make the imagery that we used in posters and trailers as mainstream as possible. We wanted people to know that it was very romantic, a great love story, would move you to tears, had some big names in it, and had even some action in it. We stayed true to it, but just tried to make sure that we brought out elements that would appeal to the widest possible audience. But a substantial part of our entire release strategy on The English Patient was to build on Oscar nominations and hopefully Oscar wins. We released the film on March the 14th, which was well into the Oscar nomination period, but very close to the Oscar award period. Our advertising campaign, our posters, our trailers, all were prepared with Oscar nomination tags on them, so that everywhere you saw an ad for The English Patient, you were made aware of the staggering achievement of 12 Oscar nominations, which really was extraordinary. We found out that The English Patient won Best Film at 6 o'clock on Tuesday morning. We had our ad designer there with us. We did the ads there and then. They were in the papers the following morning. So the Oscars were absolutely central to the launch campaign for The English Patient. Now that The English Patient has achieved what it's achieved at the Oscars, we have a whole subsidiary campaign post-release.
Why you sedative to keep me alive?
Because I'm a nurse.
We had at least a third of our campaign held back for the period from the date the Oscars announced for the next month. And so now we're printing a new poster with the Oscars on it. We've got new radio ads, we've got new press ads, we've got new everything with Oscars on it. What's been sort of most amusing in a way about The English Patient is that it has become a vehicle like one of our Disney movies for merchandise. And, I mean, Jaeger have done a whole sort of range of clothing that they're calling the English Patient look. Obviously, the Michael Ondaatje book has done extremely well in the States and here out of it. And now I see, yesterday I noticed in the papers that Penguin are reissuing their Herodotus manual, which is sort of, that kind of is merchandising gone crazy, that would do well because The English Patient is extraordinary. But, fine by me. It's good luck to them.
But the distributor cannot afford to just assume that a campaign is working. Specialised research also plays its part in the forming of a campaign.
We have a regular tracking study that goes on throughout the UK, and I think in some other territories as well. And that comes from a company called the National Research Group, or NRG as it's known. And literally they're tracking on a week-by-week basis the awareness and what they call want to see for all the movies out there in the marketplace. And they talk to a broad demographic, a broad body of people throughout the UK. And they'll do unaided awareness, so, name me some of the movies that you've heard about recently. And then they'll go on to prompted awareness, where they'll say, right, I'm now going to read out a list of titles, and the stars are in those titles. Can you tell me whether you've heard of that? And then they'll go on once people have, if they get a qualification that they've heard about the movie, they then go on to interrogate those people even more, if you like, to see if they are interested in that particular movie. Would they go and see it? Would they probably go and see it? And so on and so forth. So that tracking for any movie kicks in actually about 3 weeks before the movie comes out.
We research the materials that are being used in advertising. This is, we test trailers, we test TV commercials, we test posters, which are the three main advertising ways that distributors try and reach the public. And so we'll go out and we'll interview people about their response to the advertising materials to see what it's communicating about the film, how much it's enticing people to want to see the film, what things are being communicated about the film that may be the wrong message, that may be actually making people uninterested in seeing it. So that based upon that kind of research, the distributors can then change their advertising. They can adjust a TV spot to make it appeal more to a group that they believe is a target that isn't being reached by the advertising that they had.
So you sit there and you open the envelope, you look at the report, and if it's good news, great. If it's bad news, you think, we have to do something about that to get the general awareness of this movie up there, because if people don't know about it, they're not going to go and see the movie.
The distributor may risk huge amounts of money on advertising, but there are cheaper ways of making a potential audience aware of a forthcoming film. Publicity.
Publicity is essentially free advertising. That's really what it's about. Essentially, the space that you're securing, the editorial space in newspapers, is free. You can't buy the cover of the Sunday Times. It's not available to advertisers. You can't buy the front page of the Sun. It's not available to advertisers. You can't buy a spot on the 10 o'clock news. But if you create an event and a spectacle, you can have that. So what we're really doing is using publicity money to buy editorial that in value is far in excess of what we could afford to purchase. A television advertising campaign can cost anywhere between 100,000 and £500,000. Well, you can spend 50,000 on publicity and achieve £500,000 worth of television coverage.
Whereas I think in the past, volume of coverage about a film was the most effective way of promoting it, that is absolutely not the case now at all. I'm sure you can think of examples of films that have been, if you like, overhyped, and they arrive then in the cinema, and the natural reaction, I think, particularly for a British audience, is to say, well, they sit back and say, well, I've heard all about this, and I'm determined that I'm probably not going to like it. I want to go out being cynical about it. So what's interesting for us is that you've got to try and work it so that there's enough coverage that people are aware of a film, and to pique their interest, but not so much that they could potentially be put off.
Because publicity is about helping the film. It's not about helping the magazine, the newspaper, the TV outlet. It's about making awareness of the film gather ground within the public arena, and in such a way that it coordinates with the advertising campaign for the film.
A campaign surrounding a film must be consistent, using the same images and ideas, so that the audience receives one central message identifying the film.
It's about raising awareness as opposed to raising interest.
Awareness of a film is, in the distributor's view, to be part of a film. We buy into that film not just through the cinema ticket, but also through merchandise.
Increasingly large multinational organisations are looking at film as a way to promote their products in supermarkets and on other channels.
Licensed merchandise, toy range, clothing in the big department stores, and all these things become an element within the campaign.
Other areas that are very important are publishing, everything from the official novel tie-in to comics and magazines. Clothing is increasingly important. Video games, computer games, interactive entertainment products, food and drink. The list is endless. People go and see a film. They enjoy the experience, they enjoy the characterization, hopefully they go and see it again. Then obviously there is the opportunity of buying the toy or buying the video game or buying the book or wearing the t-shirt, which involves them much more on a long-term basis with the characters, with the plot.
Toys and t-shirts are one thing, but surely what we want are the stars, the glamour, the premieres.
Well, why do film companies do premieres? The answer, perhaps I should give, is to raise money for the charities that are going to benefit. But the truth is that the reason why a film distributor will organise a premiere is simply to get publicity, to create an event around the film, give it a stature that it deserves. But the key to it is, you know, the photographs in the tabloid newspapers the following day, the clips of everyone arriving at the premiere and the interviews that will go on breakfast television or on the news even. And it's all to do with getting publicity coverage for the film.
The fifth features premiere here in Leicester Square was all in aid of London Zoo, the Marwell Preservation Trust and the Jersey Wildlife Preservation Trust. All the money raised goes to support lemur conservation.
Premieres basically are very time-consuming and very expensive and generally a pain in the neck for everybody that's involved in organising it. And of course the reason that you do it is publicity. First of all, you have to make up your mind that it's going to cost you a lot of money because there's no way to do this on the cheap. And secondly, you have to make sure that everybody knows that the object of this premiere is to achieve publicity. You have to make sure that the celebrity guests who attend that premiere are so A-list that everybody is going to want to see coverage of that premiere, to see who went. You invite anybody who is going to get you space on a front page of a newspaper.
I think that if you're going to do an event like this, do it right. You can't start penny pinching. You have to do it properly. You have to make it a special event in order to bring the media out to cover it, because there are a lot of premieres going on. You have to try and make your film and your event as special and as different as possible.
Ideally, the potential audience must perceive every film as being different. Are we easily persuaded? Despite all the options with advertising, publicity and promotions, distributors realise that the most effective way to sell a film costs nothing.
The most potent marketing tool that we have is word of mouth. There is no doubt about that. It is your friend telling you about the film, oh, he had a good time, therefore I've got to see it.
You spend all the money, make all the effort, and push every bit of money you've got into opening the movie. After the first weekend, it's word of mouth. You may be able to support a movie if it's doing decently well, but word of mouth takes over from the moment the first audiences walk into the cinema. If they're not having a good time, the word's out like a shot, and business goes down the drain. If they're having a good time, terrific.
Razzmatazz, posters, trailers, word of mouth. But the audience needs to see a film. The distributor needs to find an outlet for their product from which they hope to make a profit.
And we have to sell our films to the exhibitors in order that they can then join us in selling them to the audience.
The distributor will go away and fix a list of cinemas where the film is going to play that again makes it most readily available for that particular audience.
We make jokes about we work so hard, we spend millions of pounds and create, you know, these wonderful films, and they come out and unlock a building and people come in and pay them money, and that's their contribution. But of course that's not true. We need to work very closely together, because the people here in these cinemas are the people who can persuade people to keep coming back.
The one thing that we've learnt over the years is you can't tell the public anything. You can give them a lot of information, but at the end of the day they will make their own mind up. And just because it's a big budget film and just because you've supplied a lot of information to the press counts very little actually on a lot of films when you get to the box office, because we've seen films just fall over. We've seen investments of over $70 million go down the pan because the public didn't like the film. Therefore, at the end of the day, the public are a lot cleverer than we are, and they will always be the ultimate determinant of a film's success, regardless of how much you spend on marketing.
Put a British animator into the Hollywood dream factory, add a dash of gospel music, and you have a perfect recipe for a blockbuster.